Now listen and let me tell you a story about a man who carried a secret for half a century. A man who was a hero in a war, but came home to a country that didn't see him that way. This ain't just a story about a judge and a courtroom. It's about a man's dignity, a promise he couldn't break, and the truth that finally set him free. You see, sometimes the truth don't just set you free, it sets a whole system on trial. So, lean in and get ready to hear about how a simple trespassing charge turned into one of the most powerful moments in history. The wind out in North Philly was bitter, you hear me? That cold January air cut right through your coat and sunk deep into your bones, down past 20 degrees. For most folks, that meant turning up the heat and grabbing a good blanket. But for 72-year-old Marcus Washington, a black veteran with nowhere to lay his head, it was a choice between life and death. The city shelter was full up. He'd been walking the streets for hours since the sun went down. That old man, hands numb with frostbite and a shivering that wouldn't quit, spied a condemned building with a busted-out window on the backside. He'd found shelter there once or twice before. It was just another one of those empty places, a ghost of what could have been. Marcus slipped inside, gentle as he could, making a home in a dark corner. He reached into his few possessions and pulled out a tattered wool blanket and a small tarnished medal. He held that medal in his hand. A little ritual he had, a connection to a time when his country said it valued him. But his moment of peace was shattered by the bright flash of a light and a police radio crackling. "Philadelphia PD, come out with your hands up." Two officers came at him, weapons drawn, like he was a dangerous man. "Got another one," the young one, Blake Peterson, said to his partner. At 6'2", with eyes as cold as the wind outside, Peterson had a name on the street for being rough. "Another black vagrant making himself at home where he don't belong," he sneered, grabbing Marcus's arm so tight the old man winced. "Sir, I'm a veteran," Marcus said, his voice steady. "The shelters are full. I wasn't hurting a soul." Peterson's partner, Officer Ramirez, looked uncomfortable but didn't say nothing. "Yeah, right," Peterson said. "Every bum says they're a vet when they get caught." He snatched the medal out of Marcus's hand. "Probably stole this, too." Marcus lunged forward. "That's mine. A medal from Vietnam. Please." That little burst of fire got him a hard shove against the wall. "Resisting arrest now?" Peterson said with a smirk, dropping the medal in his pocket. "We'll just add that to the charges." They cuffed him, and his old shoulders screamed as his arms were wrenched behind his back. Around midnight, a public defender named Jessica Chen came to his cell. She looked tired, flipping through his file without looking him in the eye. "Trespassing and resisting arrest. Arraignment is tomorrow." Marcus leaned forward. "Miss, I need to get my medal back." The officer took it. "It's all I got left." Something in his voice, that quiet dignity, made her look up. "It's in evidence lockup," she said, her tone a little softer. "I'll see what I can do, but honestly, you usually get that stuff back after the case is settled." She looked at him again. "Your form says you're a veteran." Marcus gave a slow nod. "Vietnam, 173rd Airborne Brigade, 2 tours, 68 to 71. She wrote it down. "Might help. The judge might be a little lenient." She was getting ready to leave when she paused. "You got family? Someone who can help with bail?" Marcus looked away. "No, ma'am. Not anymore." After she left, Marcus leaned against the cold concrete. He didn't close his eyes to sleep. He closed them to go somewhere else. He was back in the jungle, hearing the whump, whump, whump of a helicopter and the cries of wounded men. He remembered carrying his white commanding officer, Lieutenant James Reynolds, for 3 days through enemy territory. Both men were bleeding, both determined to make it home. He remembered the promises that had been made to him for his service. But when he came back, the promises evaporated like water in the sun. No loans for education, no help with a mortgage, no priority hiring. Just decades of struggle, lost jobs, a marriage that crumbled, and finally, the streets. When morning came, Marcus Washington sat up straight, ready to face another person of authority in a system that had failed him over and over again. The Philadelphia courthouse looked like a fortress. Marcus, shackled and in an orange jumpsuit, knew it for what it was, a place to intimidate, not to serve. In the crowded holding area outside Courtroom 4B, most of the other black and brown faces looked resigned. Marcus just sat quiet. He knew the weary dance of the justice system. When his name was called, he rose with as much dignity as his stiff joints would allow. The judge was a serious white woman named Miranda Reynolds. She had a reputation for being tough. She looked down on him, just another face in a line of defendants. Case number 4325, Commonwealth versus Marcus Washington, the clerk announced. The prosecutor, a man who looked like he won cases for a living, stepped up. He said Marcus was a vagrant and that he should be held on $5,000 bail to send a message. Jessica stepped up for Marcus, arguing that he was a 72-year-old veteran who just needed a place to stay. Judge Reynolds just barely looked up from her papers. Miss Chen, trespassing is trespassing. The status of the property is irrelevant. She then looked at Marcus. Defendant, state your full name and date of birth for the record. Marcus stood straight, his military discipline still with him. Marcus Demetrius Washington, born April 10, 1952, Your Honor. The judge nodded, making a note. And service number. It was an unusual request, but Marcus answered automatically. RA 11970426, United States Army, 173rd Airborne Brigade. Ma'am. The judge froze. Her pen stopped hovering over the paper. Her eyes, which hadn't really seen him before, suddenly locked on his face. Did you say the 173rd, under Colonel James Reynolds? The courtroom got quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Marcus felt a strange recognition dawning on him as he looked at her face. Yes, ma'am, he said. Colonel Reynolds was my commanding officer, Jim Reynolds from Virginia. Something unreadable flashed across the judge's face. She stood up so fast her robe swished. This court will take a 30-minute recess. Without another word, she disappeared through a door behind her bench, leaving everybody in the room looking confused. In her private chambers, Judge Reynolds fumbled for a worn leather photo album in her desk drawer. Her hands were shaking as she found the section labeled, Dad, Vietnam. There it was, the picture she remembered from when she was just a little girl. Her father, Colonel James Reynolds, standing in the jungle next to a young black soldier. Both men looked tired but were giving a little smile. On the back, in her father's neat handwriting, it said, Sergeant Washington, the man who carried me through hell. Miranda sank into her chair, and the memories of her father's stories came rushing back. He rarely talked about the war, but he told this one story over and over, especially as he got sicker with cancer. The story of a brave sergeant who carried him for 3 days after their helicopter went down. That man had every reason to leave me behind, her father had said. A white officer, a black sergeant, in a war where black soldiers were dying at a higher rate and getting less credit. But he wouldn't leave me. He carried me on his back, kept my wounds clean, and shared his last water. I'd be in a grave in that jungle if it weren't for Marcus Washington. Miranda remembered her father trying to find Marcus after the war. The military bureaucracy was a mess back then, and he never could. He died in '87, still sad that he never got to thank the man who saved his life. And now, that same man was standing in her courtroom, homeless, and accused of a crime. The irony was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, Jessica Chen was working on her phone, digging into Marcus's military history. What she found stunned her. Mr. Washington, why didn't you tell me you were awarded the Silver Star for Valor and were recommended for the Medal of Honor? Marcus just shrugged, the motion barely visible. Didn't seem right for a trespassing charge, ma'am. Besides, they downgraded it. That's what happened to soldiers who looked like me. Jessica kept scrolling. There's a note that your recommendation was downgraded for unusual circumstances with a classified addendum. Do you know what that means? Before Marcus could answer, Judge Reynolds walked back in. She had shed her earlier brusque manner, and a deep seriousness had replaced it. She looked straight at Marcus, seeing him for the first time as a person. Mr. Washington, she said, her voice heavy with emotion, I find myself in an unusual position. I must recuse myself from your case due to a personal connection." She then told the stunned courtroom about her father, Colonel James Reynolds, and how Marcus had saved his life in combat. She noted for the record that Marcus had been recommended for the Medal of Honor, but that it was inexplicably downgraded. Then she said something that made the whole courtroom sit up. "The fact that a man who served his country with such distinction now stands before this court homeless and charged with seeking shelter is a shameful reflection of our system's failure to honor its commitments to veterans, particularly veterans of color." The prosecutor looked uncomfortable. The judge then ordered that all charges be dismissed and that Marcus's personal effects, including his medal, be returned to him immediately. As she left, she looked back at Marcus one more time. "Mr. Washington, my father told me you were the bravest man he ever knew. He would be heartbroken to see you here today." With that, she was gone, leaving a courtroom in shock. That news about Marcus and Judge Reynolds spread through the courthouse like wildfire. By the afternoon, reporters had filled the hallways, and the story was all over social media. Marcus, who had spent decades being invisible, was now visible, in the most uncomfortable way. His case was transferred to a new judge, Judge William Hargrove, one of the few black judges in the county. "Judge Hargrove's got a reputation," Jessica told Marcus as they walked to the new courtroom. "He's exceptionally tough, especially on black defendants." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "One of those pull yourself up by your bootstraps types who thinks we all need to try harder?" Jessica nodded. "That's exactly right. He calls it tough love." The new prosecutor, knowing he had a tough case, immediately added charges for assault and stealing the medal. He claimed that the medal wasn't Marcus's. Jessica looked at him in disbelief. "That's absurd," she said. The judge, who prided himself on being impartial, allowed the new charges, setting a trial date for the following Monday. Just then, a woman burst into the courtroom. "Wait, I need to speak to Marcus Washington." It was Marcus's estranged daughter, Clara. "I'm a social worker at Veterans Affairs," she told them outside in the hallway. "I can help." She told her father that when she saw the news, she just couldn't do nothing. She started doing her own research on Judge Hargrove. The trial began with a full courtroom. The prosecutor called Officer Peterson to the stand. Peterson told a made-up story about Marcus being a danger and resisting arrest. Jessica, knowing how to handle a show-off like Peterson, was ready. She had gotten her hands on the officer's body camera footage. She stood up and said, "Officer Peterson, is it correct that my client was physically resistant?" "Yes, that's correct," Peterson said, confident. Jessica then asked the judge for permission to play the body cam footage. The room fell silent as the video showed a frail Marcus being pushed around by the much larger Peterson. The footage contradicted everything Peterson had said. You could hear him using racial slurs. The jury was now openly glaring at the officer. The prosecutor, seeing his case crumble, asked the judge to dismiss the charges. But Marcus shook his head and spoke up. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd prefer to continue with the trial. There are truths that need to be heard in this courtroom, not just about me, but about what happened to men like me after Vietnam. If the charges are dismissed now, those truths stay buried. I've been silent for too long." The judge studied Marcus for a long moment, something unsaid passing between them. "Very well, Mr. Washington. The trial will continue." As the court adjourned, Clara and Jessica were both worried. "Dad, why did you do that? You could have just walked free," Clara said. Marcus looked at his daughter. "This stopped being about my freedom the moment that body camera footage played. This is about all the Marcus Washingtons who didn't have a daughter at the VA or a judge who knew their commanding officer. It's about truth." Marcus, Clara, and Jessica met in a small conference room. Jessica had noticed the way Judge Hargrove looked at the medal, like he recognized it specifically. Clara had done some digging. "Judge Hargrove's father was Lieutenant Robert Hargrove," she said. "He served in the 173rd Airborne in 69 and 70. He died in Vietnam." The color drained from Marcus's face. "Robert Hargrove," he whispered. "My God. What does that mean?" Jessica asked, looking between the two of them. Marcus slowly sat down. The medal, he said. It's not mine, not really. He then told them the whole story, which had been buried for 55 years. This silver star belonged to Lieutenant Robert Hargrove, Judge Hargrove's father. Marcus explained how they were in a special unit, mostly black and Hispanic soldiers, sent on dangerous missions. During a fight, Lieutenant Hargrove was wounded. He refused to be evacuated until his men were safe. He told Marcus, Washington, make sure my son knows his father wasn't a coward, give him this. He gave Marcus his medal and a letter, and then died holding off the enemy to save his men. I carried that medal with me for 55 years, trying to keep a promise I couldn't keep. Marcus went on to explain how he finally tracked down Hargrove's family in 1975. He went there in his army uniform, with the medal, thinking it would help them understand. But when he got there, Hargrove's mother, the judge's mother, saw a black man standing on her porch and called him a liar. She used a word he would not repeat. She slammed the door in his face. Marcus left the medal and letter in their mailbox, but 2 days later, they were sent back with a note telling him not to contact the family again. After that, I kept the medal as a reminder of the promise I couldn't keep. Later that day, Judge Hargrove requested a private meeting with Marcus and Jessica. Mr. Washington, the judge began, his voice carefully controlled, I've been informed that you served with my father in Vietnam. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Yes, Your Honor. Lieutenant Robert Hargrove was a brave man, one of the finest officers I ever served with. The judge's face was unreadable, but his knuckles were white as he gripped his desk. And you claim to have been with him when he died. I don't claim it, sir. I was there. Silence filled the room until the judge finally asked the question that had clearly haunted him for decades. How did he die? Marcus told the story again, sparing no detail of Lieutenant Hargrove's courage and sacrifice. When he finished, the judge removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. My mother told me he died in a helicopter crash, a random accident. Marcus carefully took the silver star out of his pocket. This belongs to you, Your Honor. Your father wanted you to have it. He wanted you to know he died with courage saving his men. Judge Hargrove stared at the medal but didn't reach for it. Why should I believe you now? He asked. Marcus looked at him with calm compassion. You don't have to believe me, but I've carried this medal for 55 years trying to keep a promise to a man who gave his life for mine. I have nothing to gain by lying about it now. After a long moment, Judge Hargrove stood. I need time to consider all of this. Court will resume tomorrow morning. The courtroom was quiet as Judge William Hargrove entered the next morning. He was no longer the strict, impassive judge. He looked like a man who had wrestled with ghosts all night. He was carrying a small velvet box with his father's silver star inside. Before I deliver my ruling, he said, I want to address something personal. He opened the box, taking out the medal. Yesterday, I learned the true story of my father's heroism, not from family lore, but from the man who was with him when he died. I also learned how Mr. Washington was rejected, dismissed, and denigrated for no reason other than the color of his skin by my own mother. A murmur went through the courtroom. This personal revelation has forced me to confront uncomfortable truths not only about my family, but about the assumptions that have guided my own judicial philosophy. He then addressed Marcus directly. Mr. Washington, this court owes you an apology, not just for these unwarranted charges, but for the decades of injustice that came before them. In an unprecedented move, the judge found Marcus not guilty on all charges. He then ordered an investigation into Officer Peterson's conduct, directed the city to review its policies regarding homeless veterans, and ordered the developers to build the affordable housing they had promised. He turned to Marcus. My father's last wish was for you to deliver this medal to me. Today I return it to you for safekeeping until a proper ceremony can be arranged to honor both your service and his sacrifice. The courtroom erupted in applause.